Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's lecture is going to be about memory processing. And this first lecture is just to get your feet wet with looking at how memory works. And then over the course of the next few lectures, we'll dive into some more details about the specific memory systems and how we create, encode, and retrieve memories. And that's going to all happen a little bit later. But for today, I want to introduce you to two different memory models. And this first memory model is what we call the Atkinson-Shiffrin memory model. And you see this flowchart here. The flowchart consists of three memory systems. And the memory systems are what you see in those rectangles: sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Now, you will need to know a couple of characteristics for each memory system, and then also the process of transitioning from one system to the next, and kind of what that looks like. So let's use an example today of you are going to perhaps a party and you're meeting a lot of people that you've never seen before, you've never met before. So when you're at this party, you are being bombarded with billions of stimuli, different sights, different sounds, perhaps some different smells, and all of that information is just bombarding your brain. Well, that information first goes to the first memory system, what we call sensory memory. And here's what you need to know about your sensory memory. Your sensory memory, first of all, is incredibly limited. It can't hold everything in there. It will pick and choose what it believes is important. That might be sights that are interesting or exciting or perhaps dangerous. Those might be sounds that are unique or familiar, such as your name. If your brain decides that that sensory information is important and it pays attention to it, it'll move to the next memory system. If, however, your brain decides that it's not important, then it's unattended to and it's lost, it's forgotten. It's important to remember that your sensory memory really only lasts 2 or 3 seconds. It's really, really short. And so let me give you an example that you've maybe experienced before. You're at a party, you're meeting someone for the very first time. You introduce yourself, they introduce themselves, and they say, "Hi, my name is Bob." And as you're talking, 5 seconds later, you realize, I have no idea what this person's name is. They literally just introduced themselves, and I don't remember what their name is. It's happened to all of us before. And the reason this happens is when that person is introducing themselves, you were probably more concerned about what you were going to say next, or perhaps what you were looking like, that you weren't paying attention to what they were saying. And as a result, within seconds, you've already lost that information. It drops down out of the memory system, it's unattended to, and it's lost. Now, there are a couple of types of sensory memory, 2 types to be exact. We have what is called our iconic memory, and iconic memory is for things that are visual, right? So if you're watching a television show, right, and all of a sudden the TV turns off, well, for a few seconds you're going to have a very vivid memory of what was on the screen. If you're flipping through a magazine, right, and you're not really reading it, you're just kind of flipping through it, you might go 2 or 3 pages and then say, "Oh, hey, did I just see a word on there?" Right? Maybe I'm flipping through ESPN magazine, and then as I'm going real fast, I realize like, "Oh, did I just see something about the Chiefs?" And then I flip a couple pages back, and sure enough, there was an article about the Chiefs. That's my iconic memory. It's a very, very short, temporary visual memory. We also have what is called an echoic memory, and think echo. Your echoic memory is a type of sensory memory. It lasts only a couple of seconds, and it's for things that we hear. So right now, as you listen to my voice, I'm going to stop talking for a moment, and for a few seconds, you'll have a very vivid memory of what my voice sounds like. See how it works? And then over time, the vividness of that memory will fade. So if 4 hours from now you decide to think about the sound of my voice, that's kind of creepy, right? But if you were, it wouldn't be nearly as accurate as it is right after you hear me talking. So that's what we call your echoic memory, which is part of your sensory memory. So you've met this person and you want to make sure you remember their name. In order to do that, you have to pay attention to it. One good way to do that is simply to repeat it. "Oh, hi, Bob. Nice to meet you. Do you live around here, Bob? What do you do for a living, Bob? You pay attention, you repeat that information in hopes that it goes to the next memory system. The next memory system is what we call our short-term memory. And there's some things you need to know about your short-term memory as well. First of all, the capacity of your short-term memory is what we call the magic number 7 plus or minus 2. In other words, we can remember about 7 things in our short-term memory. And if we start to get too many things all in our brain at once, we start to forget things. So, for example, maybe you didn't study very hard for a quiz and you're about to take a quiz, so you're looking at your notes really, really fast, right? Well, if you start to look at more than 7 or 8 things, you're not going to be able to remember them all. There's that capacity. Another thing to remember is that your short-term memory has a limited amount of time, and it ranges really from about 30 seconds to perhaps up to 20 minutes or so. We tend to say that the time of your short-term memory is really however long you're using it. So if you're able to think about it, you should be able to remember it. But as soon as you stop using it, as soon as you stop thinking about it, that memory is gone. So you might ask a friend to tell you the name of Pizza Hut because you want to order a pizza. And they tell you, and you're trying to remember those 7 numbers because that's right around the capacity, right? The magic number 7. And you type in the 7 numbers in your phone, you give Pizza Hut a call. As soon as you hang up that phone, you probably don't remember that phone number anymore because you're not using it. You don't need it. So unrehearsed information, things that you don't need anymore, they're going to be lost. They're going to be forgotten. But maybe it's information that you want to remember. Maybe it's something that you want to remember days from now, weeks from now, months from now, such as the information from this lecture. Well, if that's the case, we need to make sure that we encode it. And encoding is when we take information from our short-term memory and we put it into our long-term memory. You can see that arrow there labeled encoding. We will have an entire lecture where we just talk about that one arrow. We talk about how do we get information from our short-term memory into our long-term memory. One of the most common ways that we encode is through a process of rehearsal, which is just repeating information over and over and over again. We'll talk more about that later. Let's say that you have studied and you've reread your notes and you've rehearsed this information, that it is able to move from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. Well, your long-term memory has some interesting characteristics. First of all, the capacity of your long-term memory is unlimited. It's not like the memory of a computer or a cell phone where if you have too many pictures and videos and applications, at some point it says, sorry, no more memory, you're full. Your brain doesn't work that way. The capacity is unlimited. You will never be able, or your brain will never fill up and say you can't learn anything new. You will always have the ability to learn new things. The other thing that's really interesting about your long-term memory is the duration, because the duration of your long-term memory is also unlimited, meaning you can encode information today that you remember 40 years from now. It may just be difficult to find that information, but it's possible that that information stays in there forever. Getting that information out, what you and I just call remembering, the psychological term for that is retrieval. And so you see that arrow going from long-term memory back to short-term memory. We call that retrieval. And just like encoding, we will have an entire lecture where all we do is talk about retrieval, meaning all we do is talk about how to remember things better. Over time, it is possible that you have some memories that are in your long-term memory that gets lost. The path that we find that memory just gets lost and fuzzy among the other millions of memories that we have, which is why, although somewhere in your brain is probably the memory of all of your classmates in first grade, you might not be able to remember them all right now, but they're in your brain somewhere. The other memory model that I want to bring to your attention is what we call the Baddeley's working memory model, and you might see this sometimes written as the Baddeley and Hitch working memory model. And it's pretty similar, so I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth for just a moment. You'll see that it has the same memory systems: sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Just like this previous slide that I had, if you imagine kind of turning it vertically, well, that's what we have with sensory short-term and long-term memory. The difference between the Atkinson-Shiffrin model and Baddeley's working memory model is specifically looking at short-term memory. Atkinson-Shiffrin really explains short-term memory as like a bucket. And you can fit about 7 things in there. And if you get more than 7 things, it starts overflowing and you can't remember anything, right? Baddeley describes this as working memory. And instead of a bucket or perhaps a tabletop that can only fit so many things on it, he describes that type of memory as constantly evolving and working. Your working memory is what you are thinking about right now. So imagine you are taking a math test. Well, if you're taking a math test, there's a lot of things happening all at once. You are seeing the numbers and symbols and letters on the page. You are remembering how to do the math process from what you watched your teacher do a few days earlier. You have a voice in your head that's walking you through the steps. Well, first I need to do this, and then I need to carry the 1 or whatever it might be, right? And all of that information that you are thinking about, Baddeley says that's your working memory. There's some different things going on. Think about what I said. That voice in your head that's telling you, okay, I got to do step 1, step 2, step 3. That voice is what we call your phonological loop. It's the part of your memory that's in charge of the sounds that you hear. Seeing the images on the math test, visualizing what a formula might look like, that part of your memory is what we call your visuospatial sketchpad. The memory of your math teacher saying, okay, first do this and don't forget this extra step, that memory of the process is what we call your episodic buffer. Think the episodes, the memories of from your long-term memory. Your episodic buffer is bringing those memories back from your long-term memory so you can solve a problem. And in charge of this process, kind of the foreman, if you will, that's making sure that everything is working properly, we call that your central executive. And so Baddeley's working memory model is this idea that we don't just have the surface of a desk that can hold 7 things, and that's our short-term memory. But instead, our desk is constantly changing. We're bringing memories in, we're pushing things away, there's things that we see and things that we hear, and all of that together might be more than 7 things. And that's okay if they're in these different elements of working memory. If we start to get bogged down in any one of these 3 different steps, though, it can become pretty tricky, right? Think about something like a phonological loop. This is when you are telling yourself what you want to text, but you're also listening to something on TV or someone talk to you, and all of a sudden you've typed what you hear. It's because both of those things are occupying your phonological loop at the same time. It's really difficult to do. You kind of need to stick to one task in the phonological loop and visuospatial sketchpad and episodic buffer. So I hope that this helps you better understand our 2 memory models, the Atkinson-Shiffrin memory model and Baddeley's working memory model. If you have any questions at all, remember you kind of have 3 options. Email me, bring your question to class, or post it on that discussion board on Schoology. And best of luck.